In EX6, the keyword let or let and const were introduced to handle variable declaration more robustly, replacing the often problematic var or var from the earlier version of JavaScript. Now, let allows you to declare variables that are limited in scope to the block or to the statement or maybe an expression in which they are used, unlike a var, which is scoped to the entire function regardless of the block scope. Let allows you to declare variables that are limited in scope to the block or to the statement or in expressions in which they are used. So unlike var, which is actually scoped to the entire function regardless of the block scope. So this just helps in managing variables better, and it reduces errors, especially in loops or conditional blocks. So const is similar to let, but it is used to declare variables whose values are never intended to be changed, and then after the initial assignment. So it's important just to note that while the variable declared with const cannot be reassigned, the contents of the object or array declared with a const can still be modified. Now, let's talk about block scope versus function scope. So in JavaScript, the concept of a block scope in which variables are accessible. So when you declare a variable using var keyword inside of a function, it is rather, let me say, the concept of what you must understand is that in JavaScript, the concept of a block scope and function scope are fundamentals to understanding how variables are declared, how they are accessed, and how they are managed. So these concepts become particularly important with the introduction of ES6, which added new ways to declare variables that behave differently in terms of scoping. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and see if we can do a couple of example. Now, before delving into differences between var, let, and const, it's essential to understand what a variable is in the context of programming. Now, a variable in JavaScript is a storage location that is paired with an associated symbolic name, which contains some known or unknown, quality of information, which is a value. Now, a variable allow programmers to store data values, manipulate them, retrieve them as needed through their code. Now, let's talk about the differences between var, let, and const. So these three keywords are used to declare variables in JavaScript, but they differ in their use, scope, and the way they handle the values that assigned to them. So when we talk about var, for example, variables declared with var have a function scope that when defined within a function. Outside a function, a variable declared with var is globally scoped. Then when it comes to hoisting, and then variables that are declared with var are hoisted, which means they are raised on top of their function or global scope, but initialized with undefined until the code assigning them a value is executed. And then when it comes to redeclaration, it's possible to redeclare the same variable within the same scope without errors. What we can do is to add a new directory here, and then I'm just going to call it variables. Excuse my spelling, variables. So let's say new directly in. All right, so we have variables, and then in this directory, we're going to have two files. One file is index, because we do need HTML, index.html, and then the other one is just going to be a JavaScript file, which is also, it must be within the folder called variables. So in that folder we can have let's just call it app.js, and then here we will just put our HTML structure, and then we can call our file, which is app.js. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go to our app file. Some examples. So we're going to start with the var example. So remember what we said about var. We said when it comes to scope, variables declared with var have the function scope when defined within a function. Outside a function, variables declared with var are globally scoped. Okay. And then when it comes to hoisting, variables declared with var are hoisted, which means that they are raised to the top of their function or global scope, but initialized with undefined until the code assigning them a value is executed. And then it's also possible to redeclare the same variable with the same within the same scope without errors. All right. So let's say we've got a var x, a variable called x, and then we're gonna store 1 on x. All right. So then we're gonna say if is true, then we create another variable x, which is then we store the value 2. So what's happening here is that it's the same variable that is accessible anywhere in the function or globally if it's not in a function. Let me just do this one here. It's the same variable that's accessible in a function or globally if not as a function. All right, and then we're gonna console.log x. Now if we go ahead and check this out, you just press F12 there on the keyboard, regardless of which browser you are using. So there's going to be off to F12, or you can just right click and then go to, or you can click here and then you go to developer tools. All right, so it has to be somewhere here, developer tools. You can just look for developer tools. All right, and then we will click on console. It's outputting 2. If we go and also log x, so let's say console.log, then it's still outputting 2. You see, it's still outputting 2 here, or even though it's actually now outside the function or outside the scope. You see, that's a problem with var. Now let's see with let. You can say let y is 1, and then if true, then let y is and then console.log. You will see that's gonna give us, okay, I'm just gonna change it to 3. Now if we check this out, then you actually see that it's giving us 3, right, within the scope. Now outside the scope, let's console.log. Now if we check it outside the scope, then it's giving me the original, which was 1. So there's a difference between let and scope. So with let, it provides a block scope which confines a variable to the block in which they are declared, such as loops and conditionals. And then when it comes to hoisting, variables declared with let are hoisted but not initialized, so leading to reference error if they are accessed before declaration. And then redeclaring the same variable within the same block scope is not allowed, and it will result in an error. So z is 3, or let's say z is 5, and then if true, so now so this will output 5, okay, and then this will output 6. All right, now if we check it out, then you can see it outputted 6 and 5. So let and const also provide a block scope, and then when it comes to hoisting, const behaves like let with regard to hoisting, where it's hoisted, but accessing it before the declaration will give you a reference error. And then when it comes to redeclaration and reassessment, variables declared with const must be initialized at the same time of declaration, so they cannot be redeclared or reassigned in the same scope. However, the contents of objects or arrays declared with a const can still be modified. Now, just in summary, as we end, var is suitable for cases where you need the variable to be accessible throughout a function or globally when declared outside a function. And then let is generally better for cases where you need a variable within a specific block, such as maybe in loops or maybe in conditional statements, and they're just allowing more control over the variable scope and reducing unintended side effects. And then const is best used for variables that should not change after their initial assignment. just providing you assurances that the value will remain constant, with exception to the contents of the objects and arrays. Now, understanding these differences between this declaration is crucial for writing a clean, effective, and error-free JavaScript code.